Welcome to the 50th episode of the Mind Books podcast. It is finally time to talk about Dune. And to make this episode a little special, we have asked Paul, who is very much anti-Dune, to read some quotes from Dune to make him read it too. Also, stay tuned until the end of this episode, where I ask my co-host to pick one of the 50 episodes as their pick for the best one, along with the reasons why. How are you feeling? Excited for 50th episode?
Yeah, I mean, we survived until we were able to record Dune. I remember when we started and you said, Dune will be the 50th episode, and I said, maybe we should make it the 25th, because in my heart I was thinking, we'll never get to 50, like, that's like almost 2 years, like, that's impossible.
That's what I wanted to ask you at first, if you ever believed that it would be 50.
I mean, after... we started adding more people. It kind of like entered routine, which was working. I started believing it would happen. But I remember when we first started, like the very first few episodes we recorded, and I remember saying like, oh, let's record Dune, and you said, let's wait for episode 50. And I was like, yeah, that's insane.
So hopefully we have learned and grown to be experienced professional podcasters now.
No, we certainly have upgraded the way we record.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me, and when it is gone, past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain.
So this is the 50th episode of the Mind Books podcast.
Yay.
It's happening! We have planned this before this podcast ever was conceived. Is this how we became friends?
I was thinking, because I remember I started reading Dune during the lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
When I finished it, I remember accidentally I don't remember how we noticed that we were both reading it.
You had it at work. I saw you with the book.
I guess something like that happened. That's how we started talking about books, and then we started talking about three-body problems a lot, and then eventually we came up with the idea of the podcast.
I think some books are better enjoyed if you talk about them.
Yeah.
And Three-Body Problem is more like you want to be confused and figure it out together.
Yeah.
And this book is more like it's kind of nice to share it with somebody.
Yeah.
So I think that's how we first met at a deeper level. It sounds creepy.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I think this book is perfect intersection of our interests. Because there is all the space and sci-fi and action and weirdness, and then there is existentialism and depression and like history and lore and kind of fantasy,
philosophy.
So, and you wrote a note, no aliens.
Yeah.
What about the worms?
But I mean, are they aliens?
Yes.
I mean, they're animals.
Vermist.
Well, I mean, I guess like there are a lot of animals on planet Dune, but
what would they be
if you look at the extended lore, they also explain that actually the worms are not originally from Arrakis. So they're from another planet, and I don't know, there is a lot of speculation where the worms are actually from, and some said that they were actually just genetically engineered or whatever, so maybe they're not actually aliens.
Okay.
I mean, there are like the Space Guild navigators who are basically aliens.
They are definitely aliens.
So, I mean, technically it's 3 humans, but yeah.
Whatever aliens means, they are aliens.
They're aliens, yeah, I would say so.
So the plan we have devised is for you guys, Paul, who never read this, we'd like to give you some explanation, because we have talked about this so much. Do we have a counter of how many Dune references we had throughout all of them? It's too many.
I just remember that we had one already from episode 1.
Yes. So unintentionally, I dare to say every single episode of this podcast there is a Dune reference.
I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure that there are a few where there is no Dune reference.
If there isn't one mentioned, there is one thought about.
Okay.
Somewhere.
Like in Love with the T-Rex.
Oh yeah, that is not there. Yeah. Okay, I admit.
Well, have we said like which book we're talking about today?
No. Well, obviously we're talking about the book, and some people haven't read the book.
Yeah.
And the plan is to talk about just this podcast has always been for us.
Yeah.
It's not a secret.
Yeah.
This is not for you people listening. It's basically for us. And we like to pretend that we are a podcast for the people.
Yeah.
But no, we just want to enjoy ourselves and talk about why we like Dune so much.
Yeah.
And how...
The long secret has been revealed is just an excuse to talk about Dune at some point and put Dune references in other books.
Frank Herbert's Dune is one of those classics that I never wanted to read, because I thought it would surely be terrible and long and boring and overrated. And I hated it, and then it completely changed my mind. So our plan today is hopefully give you some tangible, actual reasons why you should care about this book. So
at least why we liked it.
And why we liked it. So I would like to say that this episode is about what is there actually to find and like, not just like what this generally is. And then in the second part, which might be the next episode, the usual plot discussion, which we will do shortly because there's already movies and people might know this story very well.
Yeah.
So that's not the important part. So hopefully, Paul, you're listening. Paul is a heretic who hasn't read this book, and every time he mentioned the Dune reference, he's completely appalled. So Paul, don't be appalled and read this.
Read all the 6 books, but not in a row. That's a lesson I have learned.
To say something in general about this book, I think this is a perfect example of why I like books, because I think this book cannot happen in other media for the reasons I like it.
Yeah, I didn't think about it like this way as you're putting it, but now that you're saying it, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, as much as I love books in general, and there are a lot of different styles that I like for novels, I think you're absolutely right. Like I think the movie that has already come out, which I guess we'll discuss later, did a very good job. However, in any book to movie adaptation, there is some depth which is lost, which is like inevitable. But I think this one is definitely a book which it's using the fullest potential of a written medium.
So a big part of this book is people's thought processes, or just the inner monologue.
Yeah.
And I hated it when I started reading it. I was just like, shut up, who cares what you think? Because I went into this with the usual mindset, like, you want, I like sci-fi, so I want a sci-fi story, exciting aliens and all this. And you want a novel to be a plot-driven, engaging story. And usually you read books, or I read books, I just read them. I just go. And when it catches me and I read it fast, really go through it like in a few days, it's like a good book. And I'm like, yeah, this was fun.
Yeah.
But this is not that at all. Like, this book is not this at all. Like, not 0% this kind of book.
I had a very different experience in the sense that I never found it to be that challenging. Like, it was a hard book to read, in a sense that, like, nothing is easy and nothing is irrelevant, and the language used is not the most approachable one.
Well, it's okay.
Yeah. I never found myself saying, maybe I should give up, or I never found myself saying, today I don't want to read it.
Me too. It wasn't challenging to read, but it was challenging to get what you want out of it, or what you like find in it, like, kind of.
But that's the point. Like, I had no expectation, no knowledge, nothing. And I guess how I want to finish this super long explanation is the way the book starts. Every chapter has, this
like
small
preface,
introduction, the preface. And the preface is essentially telling you the whole story. And
yes, that's what I hated so much.
What is this? But I had the exactly opposite reaction. I was like, this is really intriguing, because like, you're telling me the story. Okay, what does this mean? Like, is this really what happened? Is this really the ending? Or like, is it not? And if it is, then I want to know how it happened. So for me, that was super intriguing. Yeah, like right from the start.
It wasn't difficult, it was infuriating at first for me. It's like, why? Shut up. Like, constantly when I started reading, I was like, shut up, get over with. What the hell is this? Why?
I felt that way much more in the second and third novel, and a little bit in the fourth.
Okay.
Yeah, but
I want to say that this book is better read if you take a lot of breaks. For me, when I took breaks, it kind of clicked.
Okay, I will say that this is kind of like curry. So, when you make curry, you make it and then you have to let it simmer for very, very long time, like for hours.
Okay.
Right? And the longer you make it simmer for, the tastier it gets.
Okay.
And also, as good as it is after you finish making it, it's even better the next day. And I feel for Dune it's kind of the same, where like you need to stretch it a little bit. You shouldn't just push through. And it will become better and better in your memory as time passes after reading it.
I agree. I would just meant that if you listen to this as an audiobook, Paul, or if you or if you read this in one go, you'll probably like maximal enjoyment will be like, yeah, it was an okay story. Like, okay, like interesting characters, the world is interesting, whatever. Next. And there are so many layers to this that I only thought about after like being completely discouraged to read this.
Okay.
If you actually think about it, like stop and think about it, it's brilliant. That's what I have to say.
Yeah.
So this book has been adapted in movies and video games, and it's been engraved in the culture. It's all over the place. There are so many things that we still keep finding. Like recently you told me, oh, Agent Smith from Matrix. It's exactly like that. And I was like, oh yeah, it's like a copy of that. It's so stupid.
Yeah.
So there is a movie that's really old. What is his name? David Finch, is it correct?
David Lynch.
David Lynch. Never mind. So the David Lynch movie.
That's, in the 80s. I haven't watched it.
I think it's weird enough to get your interest.
I know the story. I know much about it. I'm just not that interested in watching it.
It's so weird that it's I kind of like it.
I know. And it had like a very strange production history behind it, because it was produced by De Laurentiis, who's like an Italian producer. And at one point they got tired of it and cut the budget. Like it was a whole mess. And essentially it was made because Star Wars was making a lot of money. By the way, like, if you like Star Wars, reading Dune will completely change everything you think about Star Wars.
That's true.
So many ideas, especially from the very first Star Wars, Episode 4, you realize like, remember when Luke had to go work at the moist farms and stuff like that? And when you watch Star Wars, it's just like, whatever. Like, I don't care. But then you watch this and you read this and you're like, oh, yeah, that's really important. Like, you're in the desert, you're on a desert planet. You should save water and farm it.
So much in Star Wars from this.
Yeah.
Then there is the 2000s TV series.
Yeah.
Better than you think, actually.
I also know
it's
little
okay.
to nothing
like
about
it's surprisingly okay.
Okay.
I'd recommend it for readers.
All right.
And then, of course, now we're recording. There's gonna be the second part of the most modern movie by Denis Villeneuve.
New City.
Which we liked. I think it was pretty good.
Yeah. I recently rewatched it on the airplane. Yeah.
The visuals are stunning.
Yeah. Definitely looking forward to the second.
But the reasons we like this are not there because that's not possible. So, like, the thought process is not there. And that's what I wanted to like. One of the reasons I like this franchise is that it's difficult to milk it. You know how
that's true.
You know how the entertainment industry likes to milk it.
This is the anti-Lovecraft.
This is like the most difficult to adapt. Like, it gets so weird. Even if this movie became so successful that they would do all the other books, it's never gonna happen. It's so weird.
No, I always said this. Like, the second book, it's impossible to adapt.
I think they might even do it, but imagine filming,
no one will like it.
Imagine like making a movie out of the fourth book. It's so much.
Okay, so if they get past the first book, they'll do the first three. Like, the fourth book is impossible. Like, it would be the most boring book ever.
It would be so.
The most boring movie ever. Sorry.
I think it would be hilariously, amazingly.
Terrible. It would be so terrible.
No, I would love to see that. So there's a quote from the Mind Duck Books podcast. If you have a new edition of Dune and you want to have like a quote on the cover,
right?
It should say, "You can't milk this shit." The Mind Duck Books podcast.
Yeah, that's true.
So as usual, we should mention the writer a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't have much to say, just super fast. Have you read anything else by Frank Herbert?
No.
Me neither. I do want to, and after we were done with Dune, I hope we do read some more of his stuff.
I'm not sure. I think he poured so much of his creative powers into Dune that I'm not sure what's left for any other book.
So a very short recap. He's American, born 1920, and he was an ecological consultant, and he served in the Navy. He had a head injury.
Yeah, I think the most important point of his life before he was a writer is that at one point he was essentially writing speeches for politicians. And I can't help but feel that really shaped his view on the ins and outs of the bureaucratic machine that is the government. And so much of his disdain for the system of government is clearly shown in these books. And I think it comes from that.
That's true.
Yeah.
He had 2 sons, and he had an inclination for mushrooms. He has cultivated and studied and consumed a lot of mushrooms, which I think shows in these books.
Yeah.
He was inspired by a substance called, and I can't pronounce this, is it psilocybin?
Yeah.
Psilocybin? Some kind of psychedelic that's naturally occurring in mushrooms. And that was an inspiration. Another thing that he did was write a large article about sand dunes that was never published. And then I guess he was sad and got high, and then he wrote Dune.
Yeah. I would say 2 other very, very important factors in his writing Dune. First, his wife had a lot of input into the writing of these books. I won't spoil this, but, this had a lot of, a very, very big impact on the ending of the 6th book.
Okay.
So essentially of the ending of the series, unless you want to count also the ones written by his son. And also, he got major, major, major inspiration from Georgian book.
Georgian?
Yeah, from Georgia. Not
okay.
Georgia, the one near South Carolina.
Okay.
Georgia, the real Georgia.
Okay.
Because there is this book about, I forgot if it was the Ottomans or the Russians were trying to conquer this area of the Caucasus. And there was this group of tribes in Georgia, and they had all of this very unique culture. And if you see the story of this book, they are very, very similar to the first Dune. Yeah, to the point of some quotes are almost exactly the same.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. I've always heard people say Lawrence of Arabia was an inspiration or something.
Many people compare the story to Lawrence of Arabia because, it's kind of the easy comparison, the Fremen are kind of like the Arabs because they live in the desert and because, their religion is very similar. Paul Atreides is very similar in a way to Lawrence of Arabia, coming, from a richer planet and then essentially adopting the culture and becoming a leader, which I guess it kind of makes sense.
I don't really know. I never watched it.
Yeah, I would push back on that a little bit.
So there was a lot of research done, and it took him 6 years to research and plan Dune. And then when he wanted to release it, 20 publishers refused to publish Dune. And then he finally did, and he instantly changed his life and started to be a full-time writer because he was so successful. He made so much money.
Yeah.
So quickly.
Yeah.
So that was a nice surprise. Yeah. I wouldn't think it would be so popular. Pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
It was actually popular.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Well, after Dune, so he published Dune Messiah, and everybody hated him.
Yes, I'm not surprised about that. The second book is very different.
But not because of the writing style, but because of what he did with the main character.
I think it's genius.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it was a great decision, and I still think Dune Messiah is a really, really good book. But yeah, everyone hated it.
Also, what he writes, I think, is a very good example of what the people need and not what the people want.
Yeah.
People needed to read that. After reading the first book, they needed to read the second book.
I agree.
And I think it was genius.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he died at 65 because of cancer and during a surgery.
Yeah.
And then his son continued. He found some notes, and the 7th book...
Allegedly,
I don't even know.
Yeah.
But he wrote a lot of sequels.
Yeah.
And I said on our Three-Body 4th book episode that we shall never read them because they were so...
Some of them are... He wrote, actually, the sequels are only 2. He wrote a lot of books to expand the universe. Mm-hmm. Many of them are prequels, and apparently the prequels are actually pretty good. The ones that everyone hates are the 2 sequels, so book 7 and book 8.
Yeah, that's the ones I would be interested in the most. Because it's supposed to use the notes and kind of wrap it up, so yeah. So to sum up, I never said that this book was released in 1965 and it's 658 pages. It felt very long to me. It's divided into 3 books. The first one is called Dune, the second one is Muad'Dib, and the last one is The Prophet. And in between them, there is like a time skip, I think.
Yeah, there is like, yeah, you're right. There are 2 time skips. I forgot which one is the long one.
Which
but
is
you're
kind
right.
of refreshing.
Yeah.
I like that part. But it felt, even because of that, it felt super long to me.
Yeah, that's true.
So, as we promised, we'd like to just take our time and talk about just different aspects of the book. I was planning to make like a list, but I feel like it's better to just talk about it and hopefully find reasons for Paul.
Just him.
Just him. Like something I would never think this book would do for me. It fundamentally changed how I think about certain things, which was the biggest mind duck of all these books.
I mean, I would say the same. Like, it changed my mind about several things. It also had a big impact on how I think, like, storytelling can be done.
Yes.
In a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my first point that we are randomly going to go over. I love the book being about thinking. I think everything about this book is about how people think. And most importantly, I love the concept that the sci-fi is not the technology, but the thinking.
Yeah, I mean, the technology, it's there, but it's also extremely restrained. It is really unique. The best description I've heard is that Dune is a book about humanity.
That's true.
In the most animal sense of the way. Like, it's just humans evolving and reaching new stages by sheer force of will and artificial selection and...
Yes, which is very original to me. Even now, I haven't read many books where the sci-fi ideas would be in the way people think.
Yeah.
I don't know a single one.
Yeah.
So to be more specific, there are these mentats or mentats. So these people focus on logic and reason, and they can calculate things in their mind very quickly, and they always analyze data that they have available, and that's how they think. Then there is the Bene Gesserit, who specialize in controlling their body and mind to the smallest, like the perfect extent.
Yeah.
They perfect just self-control to such an extent that they can just every single muscle in their body. They can control even their biology in their body.
They control like their metabolism to the cellular level.
Which of course includes completely understanding how the body reacts and works and responds and expresses things, which gives them the ability to very well and easily read people, which is one of the most interesting character points, I guess, or like abilities, you'd say. They have this, they call it the voice, which is something that allows you to say things in such a way that it would make people react. Do you think the voice is a real thing?
In general, I like the fact that, well, again, this is sci-fi, clearly. What the Bene Gesserit do and what the Metans do is completely unrealistic. But it is all grounded, something that you can see humans do. Mentats are considered to be like these human computers, and you can see that this was like the 50s and the 60s was the age when they had to have these, for example, space projects, but they still didn't have powerful calculators. So there were these insanely intelligent people who could do really, really hard calculations just in their brains. And it was insane. And you could see something like that and then, evolving it to a extreme and essentially having these mentats who could be like essentially like supercomputers, but just using their brain. And in the specific case of the voice, it's one of the things that I always like the most about the Bene Gesserit, because I do believe it is a true thing. Like, for people who work in certain roles, like, for example, it can be teachers or it can be like an officer in the army or something like that, and they have to impart orders or they have to make people listen to them.
Exactly.
It is important how you say something.
Also when you say it.
Right. When you say it, like the tone you use.
So many aspects to it.
Yeah. There is a whole science behind it.
Like, what do you call, how do you define charisma or charm?
Yeah.
Like, it's a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And if you can use it very well, you can imagine that you would be able to tell people something that they would immediately respond to.
Yeah.
And it happens all the time. Like,
Right.
like, have you ever heard your mom call you by your surname?
Yeah.
That's the voice.
Yeah.
It's like, or have you ever heard your boss tell you at work to do something?
Yeah.
It's like an innate response you have to how he says it, because you've been working with them for a long time, or maybe you have a friend or a partner and they know what you react to.
Yeah.
So when they tell you things, you immediately respond to them even without thinking.
Yeah.
So if you were to perfect this art, then that's the voice.
Yeah, I completely agree. So I do believe there is in every human brain, it is ingrained that you have to have a response to certain stimuli before your conscious brain analyzes, what is being told to do. And the way it's used in this, is amazing. And again, of course, this is like, I guess, the first of the points we can talk about also in Star Wars. Like, this is Jedi mind tricks, essentially. I love Star Wars and I still love it after reading Dune. But clearly, after seeing this, you're like, like Obi-Wan was using the voice on the Stormtroopers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's the same thing.
Exactly what he was doing.
Paul looked back at the Reverend Mother. Politeness and his mother's obvious awe of this old woman argued caution. Yet he felt an angry apprehension at the fear he sensed radiating from his mother. A smile flickered the corners of the wrinkled old mouth.
The Lady Jessica was my serving wench lad for 14 years at school.
She nodded.
And a good one too. Now you come here.
The command whipped out at him. Paul found himself obeying before he could think about it. Using the voice on me, he thought. He stopped at her gesture, standing beside her knees.
Clearly, like, the Bene Gesserit are one of the best things to come out of Dune.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I want to say the way they learn to observe people allows them to just understand people well and then control them without the people even knowing, which is probably my favorite thing about the whole thing. The way they depict the Bene Gesserit understanding people and controlling people and the voice and how they think and how they control themselves. They write what people think, how they behave, and what you're supposed to notice to understand what the people actually mean is so well pointed out that it's actually telling you, like, kind of teaching you how to think about people. And that's the point when I kind of changed my mind when I was hating on this book. Because at a certain point, I got the point finally. Like, they were kind of hammering it home and I would ignore it. And then I would finally actually consider it for what it was, which was see the reaction of the characters, seeing like the levels of it, because this book has so many levels. Like, they keep saying like plans within plans. It's one of my favorite quotes. Nobody does things just because they do them or because it's just done, or a character wants something so they get it and that's done. There is always so many layers on this, and the beauty of it is they are all pointed out for you if you want to see them. And it's not difficult to understand it if you want to see it. If you don't want to see it, it's a story, whatever. But if you want to see what actually went through each character's mind and how the body responded and how the other characters reacted and understood what the other characters thought and then used it for something, it's fascinating. You can see it all there. You don't have to, but that's what I like.
I think this is where many people feel kind of like disoriented by it, because at one point I think you have to give up on understanding all of these like different layers, or at least like understanding them.
You can pick
while you're reading, and I kept thinking like I'm a moron. What is this? Like, what does this mean? But then I was just like, you know what? I can enjoy the book even.
Of course.
Even if I don't really understand what the book is trying to tell me here, and thinking about it much later, I kind of got an idea about what it maybe was supposed to mean, but That's how it is.
Yeah.
Like, you just have to accept that some parts, they will just have no special meaning to you.
But they could, if you think about them a little bit.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff to find, and
Yeah.
what I hated the most at first, and then I grew to like, was the prefaces at the chapters. So each chapter has like a short paragraph. It could be from like a history book. It could be like a prediction or like a statement what will happen, or it could be somebody just being like overly wise about something. I don't know how to say that.
Yeah, I really like that. As I said, I was shocked reading the very first one, and essentially it was just like a explanation of what would happen in the first 300 pages of the book, and I was like, what?
I also liked when you finish the chapter, which there are no chapters in this book, by the way.
Then the next part just starts.
Yeah, so read the preface again from the part you just read.
Yeah.
It kind of sums it up, kind of weirdly.
Yeah, that's,
Some of them are
sometimes, yeah.
Some of them are so relevant after what you just read.
Yeah.
It's almost spooky.
Yeah, that's true.
So if you read it a second time, there's still a lot to get out of it, I think.
Yeah.
The mind can go either direction on the stress, towards positive or towards negative, on or off. Think of it as a spectrum whose extremes are unconsciousness at the negative end and hyperconscious at the positive end. The way the mind will lean on the stress is strongly influenced by training.
Well, to me, one of the best things about Dune in general and the lore he built is that, like, he wasn't afraid to use time. And what I mean by that is, in a lot of sci-fi words, sometimes even fantasy words, things tend to be kind of rushed. And what I mean by that is, because to us 100 years feels like a really long time, in these sci-fi words they put like 100 years as a very long time. Things are kind of limited and caged within this time restriction, which is just based on our lifespans. In Dune, people say it's the year 10,000. It's not the year 10,000. It's the year 10,000 from the Battle of Corino. It might be like the year 20 or 30,000 from the present. But besides that, the Bene Gesserit plan started 10,000 years before. Yeah. Okay, that's maybe a little too long, but I think he does a really good job in creating, this concept that because this is a sci-fi world, he can play with very, very long-term projects. Things can be controlled over a very, very long time, end up affecting like the destinies of basically a galactic empire, which is really cool. I don't see that many, universes doing that.
That's true.
It is impossible to live in the past, difficult to live in the present, and a waste to live in the future.
So another point that I want to mention was that the main character, Paul, goes through like a development where he can basically see the future, and that's the same thing you're doing with the prefaces of the chapters. Which is kind of fun.
To me, that was one of the biggest.
Is it a spoiler?
Wow, no, I don't think so. To me, that was one of the biggest wow moments. Like when I finished reading the book and I realized, oh, okay, so that was kind of like the whole idea. These prefaces were making you feel like Paul, because Paul at the beginning is dreaming at the very beginning of the book. And
Paul.
Yeah, and essentially, he's a part of him already knows everything that's going to happen in the book.
What do you despise? By this, are you truly known?
And the other thing that I really like, which you don't really get until you've read Dune Messiah, is that because, as you said, these prefaces are excerpts from books, like within the lore, they are very biased.
Yes.
They're extremely biased. They are basically propaganda, but you don't know that. Like, you just read it and you're like, wow, yeah,
that's
very cool.
What I meant by overly wise. Like, some of them are like purposefully dumb or
And then you read the second book and essentially, there is the prologue to the second book and you're like, oh yeah, now that I think about it, like this it is kind of like propaganda. Like if you read all of those prefaces, it's kind of like, yeah, this is such a great hero and you should love him. And it's like, easy, like
effectively, it makes you feel exactly like the character feels.
Yeah.
And you don't know it until the end.
Yeah.
Which is so well thought out. I guess it's a spoiler, but realizing what you should realize is not a spoiler, really.
Also, you should have read this book already.
Yeah, but I guess the point of this is to explain why this is fun, or why we like this.
A process cannot be understood by stopping it. Understanding must move with the flow of the process, must join it and flow with it.
So completely different note I really like is we recently talked about sword fights, the Snow Crash episode, and I said they were really boring to me.
Okay.
And the dagger or sword fights here are somehow super interesting, even though nothing happens. And it's because it's all about the mind games and not about the fights, which is something I don't see. Like, again, where is this kind of fights in books?
Jojo.
Okay. So all the duels and stuff, it seems like it's going to be very lame. And then it somehow gets you with the thought process again.
Yeah.
It's so interesting.
That's true. I would say in general, there is a lot of background action. If you think about this book and the amount of action-like events which happen within the book, which are put in the background, it's insane.
Yeah,
it is
what
constantly
happens?
skipping the action.
But then there is a moment where the action is focused on.
Yeah.
And it feels like...
That was my
it is.
point,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, he really highlights only the action which has some kind of impact on the deeper level of analysis. So he completely skips a lot of fights and a lot of other situations because they would just be like people fighting and explosions and
like whatever.
dying and
Exactly.
that's it. Like there's no much more to it.
Jameis called out in ritual challenge. May thy knife chip and shatter. This knife will break then, Paul thought, and he circled warily opposite Jameis, repeating silently to himself the Bene Gesserit litany against fear. Fear is the mind killer. It was a cool bath washing over him. He felt his muscles untie themselves, become poised and ready. I shall sheath my knife on your blood, Jameis snarled, and in the middle of his last word, he pounced. Paul's motion was slowly timed, beautifully fluid, but so slow it gave Jameis the margin to twist away, backing and turning to the right. Paul withdrew, crouching low. First you must find my blood, he said.
Yeah, and another thing that I really like is that the lore or the history. I hate history lessons. You know already by listening to me. I kind of hate info dumps and lore dumps. And that's another reason why I kind of hated this, like at first.
I really like them. That's why I really like the beginning.
And I really like it here because it's simple.
Yeah.
There are very few things that you need to understand to get this world lore thing, and it's surprisingly deep, like the worms, like whatever worms, and then there's so much about those, and then there's like the spice, whatever, you get high, and then there's so much about what that is.
You don't get high with spice.
Yeah, I mean, like for a person who hasn't read it, you know, there's a drug and there's a worm, so to be like, okay, I get it. What is it? Why is this interesting? So then it's actually interesting. I was surprised. I didn't think it could be interesting.
Right. I guess this is a good time to transition into another point which I think so many books fail to do. And we talked about this a little bit when we did Three Body Problems, which is the point about environmentalism and planetology and ecology. I think this book does an excellent job at really explaining the impact of an environment on people and culture, but also how it can shape, the planet shapes the people, and then the people shape the planet.
Yes.
Which is really interesting, and it's something that, again, he does a really good job with this long-term thing. In usual stories, you don't think about humans shaping the planet because that takes forever, and our perspective is usually pretty short. It's about a century, and in century, you can change the planet a little. I guess we are, unfortunately, but not like you're not turning a desert planet into a green planet. That was really, really interesting to me.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely. And also to elaborate on the culture, I never felt like the culture would be so well put. Usually you're in a fantastical world, especially sci-fi. All these aliens and all these planets.
No aliens.
This is so simple. It's just a desert planet, but it feels so real.
Yeah.
Because the things that happen build up the situation so well.
Yeah, I agree. Like, if you look at the Fremen culture, like, you can see this being, like, inspired by real people. But what I mean is, if they told you that the Fremen are real people and he's using real culture, you would say, yeah, I can see that.
Nothing feels like it's there just because it's interesting, cool idea. Everything feels like it's there because it has to be there.
The mystery of life isn't a problem to solve, but a reality to experience.
Yeah, so I guess we should slowly wrap it up, or do you have any other points?
2 more points I want to look. The first one is, as we said before, so this book is not about technology and it's about machines and hating machines. Ludis, which I learned that you didn't know the meaning of this word.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Yeah,
I forgot again.
Yeah, Ludis is like a group of people in
oh yes, okay.
in the UK who hated machines.
I remember.
Anyway, to me, this is kind of like the ultimate comeback of religion. Killing the machines, which are, like, in a way, like the biggest enemy of religion in a spiritual sense, because you know, you have these things which are clearly completely human-made. They have no soul whatsoever. They can perform these extraordinary tasks and in a way even surpass humans, essentially putting humans in the place of God because they are creating this life. Religion has this ultimate comeback, completely banishing thinking machines. I think this really had a strong impact on how sci-fi is taught. So that's one point. The other point is, I mean, I don't want to talk about this too much because I think this is one of the most discussed points about Dune, which is the hero story where Paul at the end, you know, you're left wondering, like, was he really a hero? And, you know, he's aware. First, he kind of wants his revenge. So he's not really moved by noble intent. And then he kind of becomes aware that what he's doing might bring destruction and death everywhere. But it kind of he feels powerless to do it. And in a way, at least when I was reading, you're kind of like cheering for him because he's the main character.
Definitely, yes.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, you're kind of, there is like this small voice inside of you saying, this is not going to end well.
Exactly.
And we talked before about one of the great things about the second book is that essentially it throws in your face, like, you know, this was the hero of the main book, of the first book. He was the main character, but...
And obviously this wasn't going to go well, and you knew, so you didn't want to see that, because that's how stories go, right? Stories are like, you know, happy endings, and the hero is the best, and there's going to be a protagonist that's all-powerful and perfect.
Right. I just want to say this, because I want to connect myself to the... Connect what I'm saying. Yeah, I was thinking about Matrix. No, I want to connect what I'm saying to another thing which is often referred to when talking about Dune, which is the myth of the white savior. Have you heard about that?
I think I know what you mean.
Well, anyway, some people say that essentially Paul is just another story of a white savior, the guy who comes from the civilized place, and you know, the Fremen are a bunch of barbarians, and immediately becomes their leader, and you know, they're best of the best, and he brings them to freedom and success. So he saved the Fremen, but essentially also destroyed their culture and their lifestyle, and lots of them are not happy, and millions of them died on faraway planets for basically no real reason. None of them wanted to conquer the universe. They just wanted to have their planet in a better condition.
It is genius in that way to see what it actually means to if this actually would go down. Yeah. And the religious part, like deconstructing the religion and seeing how it can be used and abused and get out of hand and not being able to do anything about it anymore. And like it's very applicable to real life events. Yeah.
Once, men turned their thinking over to machines in the hope that this would set them free. But that only permitted other men with machines to enslave them. "Thou shalt not make a machine in the likeness of a man's mind," Paul quoted. Right out of the Butlerian Jihad and the Orange Catholic Bible, she said. But what the OC Bible should have said is, "Thou shalt not make a machine to counterfeit a human mind."
And also, I wanted to say, speaking of real, I really like that there is no nonsense, like story nonsense, like the usual thing that happens where the main character is about to die and then somebody saves them the last minute, or
right, yeah, that's true.
Or the villain has like the speech to explain it, or ex machina saves the day, or you dead.
Yeah. That's true.
Like at one point, I remember I was very amused. 2 lines in the book, I was like, "Oh, it's done. We knew what would happen. He's dead." So I love that how even the fights or even like the exchanges or the plans, they just go as they would go down. There's no padding to it. It just happens. It happens in your face always. So I like that very much.
Yeah.
There's no fucking around on Arrakis, I guess.
No. Definitely not.
Lacus teaches the attitude of the knife, chopping off what's incomplete and saying, now it's complete because it's ended here.
I want to add, this is kind of a side note, like musical
okay.
musical moment. So first, there is the obligatory Blind Guardian shout out. So there is a Blind Guardian song about Dune called Traveler in Time. I feel so ashamed of myself because I never realized that it was that. Even though in the because the title is Traveler in Time, you don't think about Dune about Traveler in Time, even though the lyrics clearly say the morning sun of Dune.
Okay. And
then there is a Iron Maiden song called To Tame a Land, which is a very good summary of the plot of the first book.
I should listen to them.
Yeah, you should. Everyone should. Secondly, so while I was reading this book, I was listening to Nightwish album called Music and Humans, which I think the title Humans was very, very fitting to story of Dune. And I think it's a very good fitting album for the book in general. But I've listened it so many times while reading the book that now every time I listen to it, I get flashbacks to Dune. And yeah, it's
that sounds cool.
Yeah,
I can't listen to stuff while I read.
I have to. Like, it makes my reading experience much more pleasant.
Yeah, we always do this at the end of the section, so I have to ask you: would you recommend this book?
Yes, that's why we're having this podcast. Like.
And I have to say, not to everybody.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
If you're reading this for fun, you will hate this. If you're reading this for sci-fi adventure, you will hate this.
Yeah.
If you're reading this for leisure, I think you would still be like, it's okay.
I think like you have to go in with no expectations. Just read it and...
It's impossible. I had so many expectations, and if you're listening right now, you'll have so many expectations. If you want to think for yourself, this is the book.
Yeah, fair enough.
People read so many self-help books and so many like how to be whatever and how to run a business.
How to be muaddib.
How to be muaddib. A fun book.
This is How to Be Muaddib, the book.
There are so many, like, famous person A writes how he was successful. And they have all these rules and laws of power we mentioned on this podcast and all this crap. And it's like, okay, I guess. But there are books where you show and explain by example without saying you're doing it.
Yeah.
And this is doing it so well. Telling you the truth of something by telling your story already makes you accept it and understand it better, and supporting it by explaining it in depth and using it in multiple ways makes you see it in so many perspectives that you can fully understand it, and gets you to understand and learn something without learning it, which is so nice. And that's what I want to tell you people who are listening and read self-help books. Don't read them. Like, read the stories. The stories tell you the things better, and already you have to admit that the people who are able to teach you the things by telling a story are so much more capable of explaining it in a better way and understanding it better than the people who just write a list and have a self-help book, that it's incomparable. So that's why I recommend this book.
Okay. Top 10 self-help book.
Yes.
Number 2, Dune.
It is so shocking to find out how many people do not believe that they can learn, and how many more believe learning to be difficult.
This book will help you think for yourself. It's why I like it. So if you want to think, this book is 100,000%. Please read it. If you want to have fun, then I don't recommend it.
I had fun reading.
I will have to say I didn't.
Okay.
I have to say I had lots of fun reading book 3 and 4. 4 is my favorite. It's so much fun. I love it so much. It's so much fun. And number 2, I was so depressed.
Okay.
Number 1, I felt like I was hard at work. I
Okay.
felt like I had to process so much stuff. It has to set up so much.
That's fair.
And there's so much to think about.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was exhausting.
Yeah.
But it was worth it.
Okay.
So I don't recommend it to everybody.
All right.
There should be a science of discontent. People need hard times to develop psychic muscles. Mao Dib.
Okay, so
Okay.
that's the first part. On the next episode, we'll dive into the plot. And if you don't want to read this, we'll make sure, or we'll do our best to tell you what it's about plot-wise.
Okay. All right.
So thank you again for joining me. I hope that you'll still be here on episode 100.
Yes.
I can't believe that we're actually here on episode 50.
Yeah.
So
Thank
thank you
you.
so much. And that's it for today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Like I mentioned at the beginning, I have asked my co-hosts for the best pick, best episode out of the first 50. So here they are.
Hi, this is Paul. The episode I recommend is episode 24, Haunted, by Chuck Palahniuk. It's great weird fiction, really fun book, and it's also fun listening to Philip squirm and be really uncomfortable for 1 hour. Check it out.
Three Body Problem trilogy, starting episode 5. Not because I liked the books, but because Philip was very enthusiastic about them, and it was a lot of fun poking holes in them.
So my favorite episode was episode 37, The Redemption of Time, where Paolo and Philip thoroughly dismembered that book for all the meanings of that word. And that was a treat on its own. But also, in particular, I enjoyed where in this series, The Remembrance of Earth's Past, they always give out these depression points. But in this book, they gave out different points. And the process of slowly realizing what the points were, that was a lot of fun.
My pick is episode 27, episode about the lore of the Way of Kings. It was the only time in the whole podcast that we spoke the whole time only about the lore. And I love talking about the lore of words and books. That's probably my favorite part. So that's why it was my favorite.
I would like to say thank you to everybody who's been on this podcast. It really means a lot to me. And to everybody who's supported me. And of course, all you who are listening. Thank you so much. Please rate us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible. It really helps the podcast. And tune in next time for part 2 of Dune, where we deep dive into the plot.